Hi, my name is Emmy. You're listening to Are You Okay? And from the Media Factory and the south end of Burlington, Vermont, this is 99.3 FM WBTV LP Burlington, streaming online at 993wbtv.org. I have a full show in store for you all today. I have a poet who is coming on the show. I get to talk to them about their new book called This Is How Wildflowers Grow. Their name is Mica Rich, and they are a New England poet. I'm really excited to get to the conversation, so here's Mica. Thank you so much for being here. You have no idea. I'm so happy to be talking with you, and I'm so glad that you agreed to come on my show, and I really, really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's so exciting to be able to take this work that I've done and bring it to all these different platforms. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So cool. But yes, so thank you for being on my show. My show is called Are You Okay? I would love to explain how you and I even know each other, but before I ever get anywhere with guests, I always ask, are you okay? And how are you doing on this fine day? Gross Monday, cold weather, but how are you?
I am doing both good and bad, as is life right now. I think I there's a lot in my life that I have to be grateful for right now. I'm at this incredible period of transition and transformation in my life, having completed what feels like a really major chapter of it and put that, into a solid format that other people can access.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to see, what happens from here, see what
That
happens next.
is awesome. Thank you for answering that. So, Mica is a now published author. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but you also do editing, is that right?
I do. I run a freelance editing business, Mica L Editing. I'm always looking for clients. Please hire me.
That is so cool. So, you can explain this as well, but you and I know each other because we went to high school together, but we only ever crossed paths in this one kind of very magical, very Breakfast Club style writing class that was one of the only classes I've ever taken. I had taken in high school that really had people of all different ages, which I thought was really interesting. And so you and I met in that class, like, I don't know, 7 years ago, like a very long time ago. And we haven't really connected since, but I don't know. I followed you on Instagram at some point in time and just have been kind of like watching your journey very quietly in the background since. And I've been so impressed with all of the things that you have done. And I read your book, which is what we get to talk about today. I have it with me right here. So do you want to just start by kind of talking about like who you are and kind of how you came to write this book?
Yeah. Wow. Kind of hard to pick a place to begin, but I guess at the beginning, I had a very traumatic childhood. Lived with a narcissistic, abusive parent. So I spent an entire childhood being re-traumatized by a parent who convinced me that I was unlovable, that I should be grateful for his abuse because I was so difficult to love.
Mm,
And that is a very hard thing to break through and unlearn and relearn from. But I've also embraced part of having been raised by my father was that I became the emotional caretaker. I became responsible for his and then by assumption everybody else's needs. And the kind of person that made me is somebody who ended up being very empathetic and cared very much about how other people are feeling around me. Um, and the reason that I wrote this book was because when I was going through the worst of that, I was also very isolated. I didn't have anybody else's experience really to compare mine to. I didn't have any way of knowing how much of what I was experiencing I deserved, how much of it was real, and how much of it, wasn't. How much of it did I need to stand up for myself from, get away from? Um, I I didn't really start doing poetry until high school. Actually, that class that we were in was the first place that I really dug into poetry.
that
Um,
is wild to think about. I remember, I know that, so I don't know why, like this class has just stuck in my head for a really long time. I don't know. if you're like me, but I forget so many things. But that class was like, for whatever reason, really cemented in my head. And I remember your poetry and just thinking that you were so amazing then, you know?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That means a lot to me. It was a wild class. Some of the poems, actually from this book are originally from that class. I have kept them.
It's really cool.
But I really, having been through what I went through, I really wanted to get these poems out into the world, to reach other people who had been through similar things. And I wanted them to know that they were not alone, that they absolutely did deserve better. And I wanted them to have some words of encouragement to start the healing process. It has been, the longest, wildest, most complicated journey of my life, growing through all of these different layers of healing, to reach the place that I'm at now. And it's pretty magical. I want other people to share in that, to have that.
Yeah, I totally feel like that's what you accomplish. I mean, I've read it cover to cover at this point. So the book is called "This Is How Wildflowers Grow," and I notice you have it split into three parts here. You know, living, learning, and healing. And I'm wondering if you might be able to speak to why you broke those apart. I know just, from having read it that it really like they almost feel like three separate books or something like that. Like you do such an amazing job of encompassing like a feeling and an emotion in each of those parts. Like I just know like in part one I just felt like relaxed and rooted and like really thought back to my childhood, which was like very involved in with nature and like the neighborhood kids. Like it really brought me right back to where I grew up. And in part two my heartbeat was like raised the entire time. Like I was like anxious through it. And to be able to create that like story really amazes me. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to those three parts and why
Sure.
you did that.
Yeah, thank you. You also, pretty much put into words what my own life experience was, living through those sections.
Yeah.
So thanks for that feedback. Um, I guess you can divide my life into, I mean, millions of sections really, but to simplify it into three. I don't remember a whole lot about my early childhood, prior to the abuse, but what I do remember, I lived in the woods. I grew up in the middle of the woods in rural New Hampshire, um, and living outside, being the sense of wildness and freedom, was everything for me, and was where I continued to find safety and comfort in nature while I was going through the abuse, through the trauma. So living, that first section is the early years. It is the experience of just living, of just experiencing with wild abandon, which very quickly came crashing down on me in learning. And I learned all kinds of lessons, not all of them good. Actually, most of them lessons probably that I shouldn't have learned, wish that I hadn't had to learn that way. But at this point in my life, consider all of those experiences very valuable because it got me to where I am, and it allowed me, to this platform where I could speak to other people's experiences this way. Um, and then the last section, healing. I'm kind of amazed myself how many poems I was able to fit into that, because it feels like the shortest section of my life. To
Hmm.
me, it feels like I've done my most significant healing only in these last couple of years. It's been now 1 year since I've been no contact with my father, and probably that's where the most significant growth has happened.
Wow.
Finally being, outside of what felt like a cell that I was living in, a
Hmm.
little bubble. And that was my entire understanding of the world and how it worked, and my father and what he, showed me and taught me and told me in all of the various ways. I thought that that was it. I thought, okay, this is how the world works.
Yeah.
And that was what I learned. And what broke me and what traumatized me, and what for a time, I lived for several years unsure of whether or not there was anything outside of that, if this was just how the world was. I didn't know if there was going to be an other side, or, holding on to the belief that it really was me, that I was being treated this way because I was the bad guy, because I was doing
Hmm.
something wrong. And who wants to live an entire life being the bad guy and knowing it and receiving hurt from everybody else because of it? And so I wasn't sure if I would get this far.
And what have you learned since breaking out of that paradigm, or having that paradigm shift, and cutting off that, communication? And you said, like, almost like unlearning, I feel like, I mean, I think especially people who have endured trauma in some ways, but honestly, also so many people in their, like, so much of our 20s is kind of about the process of unlearning, and like kind of, creating these paradigm shifts. And I'm wondering, what you've learned through this process, and kind of, where you think it might take you. Like, I can't imagine how freeing it must feel.
Immensely. Yeah. Um, it's been world shattering in the most
Mm.
complicated and beautiful way. I have had so many experiences that I never thought that I'd have. I have a community. I have what feels like, a sense of place and of purpose for the first time in my life. I read, if I can announce, I read my poetry regularly on Thursday nights in Manchester, New Hampshire, at Slam Free or Die. We have an open mic every Thursday night at Stark Brewing Company. So they're my home base and they're my family.
Yes.
I love them now.
Yeah.
Um, and I never thought that I would be brave enough to get up on a microphone and talk about my deepest fears and insecurities.
Yeah.
And more than that, never thought that I could be welcomed for that because I grew up in an environment, in the environment my father created, where I was not allowed to have needs. I was not allowed to talk about my pain because he took that pain personally.
Mm.
And of course it was, but you can't tell a narcissist that it's their
Yes.
fault. They don't really handle that well. So I grew up smushing everything down, teaching myself not to feel anything, not to talk about how I was feeling, and to just be fine, to
Mm.
accept what I was told I deserved, and didn't deserve more than. So to realize that I am allowed to try, I'm allowed to
Mm.
ask for things, to want things. I'm allowed to talk about myself. And not only am I allowed to talk about all of these deep fears and insecurities and all of this pain and hurt, it's actually helping people. I think
Yes.
the thing that blew my mind the most was not just that I'd be free to talk about it, but that it could actually be beneficial to people, not
Hmm.
just myself. And it has been. There's the freedom to just express yourself freely, to talk about your emotions and your experiences is so underrated. It's so incredibly important. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but it's been such a,
absolutely. A
yeah,
hundred percent. I mean, that's what, my show. I talk to musicians mostly because, it's a radio show, but I mean, the premise of my show is like, how, basically the premise is like, we gravitate so much towards this idea of, like, not always sadness and pain, but just emotion. When people are emoting in whatever way possible, we gravitate towards that so much more than we gravitate towards anything else. Like, people, there's something like people whose favorite songs are sad listen to them on average like 800 times more than people whose favorite songs are happy. And it's because, when people are able to share something that's difficult that they went through, it's relatable, and it's going to be relatable to you in an incredibly different way than it would be ever relatable to me. And that's like the beauty of art and writing and creating things and putting them out into the ether, is to say, like, hey, here's this experience that I had, and it's probably not that far from an experience you have, or an emotion, or an understanding, or any of these things. So I get it. It must feel so rewarding to be able to have, a product now to say, hey, look, if you're feeling this way, I felt this way too, and I'm coming out of it. I have a part three, like, there's an after to all of that. I think more people, and probably more young people, need to hear that too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, everything that you say is so important. Yeah. And yes, there is an after. There
Yeah.
is, there is, and it's beautiful. And I think the most exciting thing about having completed this book and put it out into the world is that I think that chapter of my life is closed now, and I closed it well.
Mm,
And now I get to release myself from it a little bit and
yes.
discover an entirely new person and an entirely new life. And I am so excited for that.
Yes, that is so awesome. And I can't wait to see like what else you'll do and what else you'll come out with and kind of what your next, step will be. And I'm sure I can't imagine you won't, put that down into words in some way. I really want to give you a chance to read some of your poetry. I would be honored if you would do it. But first, I do want to take the opportunity because it's so rare that I get to do that to talk about like why did you start writing and what are some of your inspirations, whether they be, novels or poems or whatever it be? Like, why do you think you gravitated towards writing?
Um, it has literally always been the foundation of me. My both of my parents are also big literature lovers, so I grew up with words always. My parents read me bedtime stories. I was encouraged to read. I was very good at reading at a young age and loved just disappearing into a story.
Hmm.
I started writing novels, quote unquote,
Yeah.
novels, when I was 10.
Oh
I
yeah.
wrote like a very small chapter book about the games that I would play with the neighborhood kids, where we all became characters and played, role playing games. Um, and I never thought that poetry would be my thing, weirdly
Hmm.
enough.
Did
And
you
when I
think
found it, I just took off with it.
did you think that did you think you'd be writing novels? Like did you always think you'd be a writer and then poetry kind of like snuck up on you or um or are you surprised at all that you're writing, I guess?
No, I was always going to be a published author. It has been the one dream that has stuck with me my entire life. Yes,
So awesome.
that was always going to be a thing.
That's so
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
Um, all right, shoot your favorite books. Give me like top three. What are we talking?
Okay, well, I feel like I have to put poetry in there. I have loved reading Rupi Kaur's books. Milk and Honey was incredibly empowering to read and beautiful. Andrea Gibson is another one of my favorite poets. Um, Poetry in particular. One of the best like whole books of poetry that I've ever read is called Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter.
I'm gonna write that down.
um, Wonderful, beautiful. And speaking of exploring trauma, it's a story about a man who loses his wife. He has two young boys, and his wife dies in this horrible, unexpected way. And part of their coping together as a family is that dad kind of creates this alter ego called Crow, and Crow is a trickster, spirit, nanny, bully, all of the things, teaches all of these various lessons about grief and helps the family heal. That was an incredibly powerful book to read as well.
Awesome. That's so cool. Okay, well, I mean, I'd love for you to read a couple of poems if you would like, or just a poem, whatever you're most comfortable with. Um, I wanted to pull out. So I guess quickly before you do that, if it's okay, can I ask you about some of the lines that you wrote? Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Okay, cool. I just want to be sure. Um, I like have circled the poem Innocence. And I just loved this line so much. I didn't know if you wanted to speak to it at all, but um it's um from deep in the tangles of repressed memories rise the faint scent of laundry detergent, tree sap, cut grass, the last place I ever called home, the last time I existed in a space without shame, for the imprints my feet left in the dirt or the oxygen I wasted. When I dared to breathe without first considering if it was convenient for you. Sorry I butchered the saying of that. But I just thought that whole line was so beautiful, and I could just see like for the imprints of my feet left in the dirt or the oxygen I wasted. I thought that was so beautiful. I didn't know if you wanted to speak to, I don't know if you remember how you wrote that or how that came about.
Yeah, sure. So that is one of the few sort of sensory memories that I
Mm.
have. I remember things very vividly with all five senses. Um, of my early childhood, of the before. Some of my favorite senses and experiences when I was that little were those smells: cut grass, tree sap, and laundry detergent. My family always used a very particular laundry detergent. I smell it now and I have all kinds of flashbacks. Um, and that was a very innocent time for me, a time of just enjoying, experiencing life. Um, and then I was taught shame. I was taught shame for things I shouldn't feel shame about, like existing, like having needs in a space. Over the years during my trauma, I made myself so small and tried to cut off all of the needs that I have. I stopped myself from wanting anything, from taking up space any more than, was physically possible. So that's where that line comes from. There
Mm.
was a before, and that was the turning point.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I don't know if you have a favorite poem of yours or anything that you like from the book, but if you wouldn't mind, I would love it if you would read us something.
Sure, I'm happy to. Do you have any requests?
Oh, I have. Okay, you want to know what? I know I loved I don't know if it's called, is it called Pagan? The
Words and things, probably.
words and things. I haven't looked at it, but I just know exactly. I know that one's towards the end, but I love that poem. I don't know if you want to do, so maybe that'll be my choice and then maybe you can pick one as well. Does that sound okay?
Sure, that
Awesome.
sounds great.
I loved that poem. I didn't even have to look in the book. I was like, oh, that's the one that I want them to read.
Yeah, yeah, this was a good one. All right, words and things. Christian is a word that never fit quite right. Episcopal doesn't seem to work either. They're rigid words, too formal on me. Christian has always felt stagnant, like the graying brick walls of a church. It tastes of stale bread and sour wine when it slips between my teeth. It's such a thin sound, dry and papery and delicate, as if I could break it just by scratching too hard at its surface. This is not a word for me. Pagan is a word that rolls off the tongue, sometimes with fire, others with ancient wisdom and concentrated grace. It has a color like the wood of all trees, every shade of mahogany and cherry. It is filled with knots and bends and swirls, a world of movement within its letters. It echoes with possibility in each syllable. Pagan feels like summer nights in short dresses, wide open spaces where you stretch out your arms and spin, like the first time you let your skin breathe. It is a word that smells of herbs and wildflowers, soaked in cinnamon and honey. To breathe it in is to breathe life back into a flickering soul. Pagan is a sturdy word, a proud word. It feels no shame. It lived before us. It will outlive us. It is ancient and yet ever changing. There is no end to its knowledge. Pagan is freckles and wild curls, muddy feet and calloused palms, a soul that knew itself and saw itself in the world around it even before it broke its chains. Pagan is a word that won't be broken under pressure, and I feel so much stronger when I speak it.
Mm. Ah, even better when you performed it. It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that one. I don't know if you have a favorite of yours that you would like to also perform.
Yeah, I do. So funny enough, I think that poem was one of the poems that I wrote during class. I think that that's one
No
of my older
way.
ones. That one has stuck around for a long time. I think I'm gonna go with my other favorite one. So the first poem that I ever performed live is called Strength Training, and I
Mm,
performed it during my school's survivor showcase for survivors of abuse and assault. I'll read this one.
mm,
Strength Training. First, it was bracken and thorns, stacking snow to send sleds flying, landing on shoulders or back, pricking skin, scars added to freckles as blood bloomed on my sleeves. And if I flinched or shouted, do it again, until I stopped feeling the pain. The price of fitting in. We were 5 kids with acres of woodland wilderness all our own. The oldest and only boy, our fearless leader. The tasks he gave to test us, to prove our strength, endless. I've been scraped and bruised and bee stung, the miracle of never breaking a bone. But this was not my true test. I thought strength meant crashing into trees, falling from the branches and brushing the dirt off, but taking thorns to hands and asphalt to knees was nothing. Neighborhood kids and fantasy games were no match for what hit me when I finally went home. At 10 years old, my head hit the kitchen wall. Spittle hit my flaming cheeks, and suddenly I knew what fear was. Strength became a deadly game. How long could I control my muscles with the door jamb digging into my back? Don't move. Not until he's done shouting. Strength became ignoring the aching in my face. Fight the tears back or he'll do it again just to spite you. Strength became walking a minefield. Was it ever safe to step? What questions led to explosions? Sometimes even silence set them off. Cartography was useless, a waste of paper and ink. By 13, I was 35 and unbreakable, mostly, because there was nothing left to break. Rock bottom never looked so soft, but at 14, something snapped and leaked out change. Strength became a new thing entirely. Strength became cutting the ropes and stowing the steel. Strength became screw this and come at me and taking it all in stride. Now I know what strength is, because I'm still standing. I've got people to meet and goals yet to reach. I can sing myself to sleep now. Am I strong enough for you yet?
You did that without looking at anything.
I did. That one's been in my head for a lot of years now.
Wow, that is beautiful. But that is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I had that similarly. I had some like little like stars that I that really kind of like jumped out to me. Mica, thank you so much for performing those, and thank you for taking the time to let me interview you. Look at this, telling me that I have 10 minutes left in my meeting. This happens to me every time. It's rare that I get through an interview where I like don't accidentally end because I'm a chatty person. But anyway, Mica, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being on the show. Will you like plug yourself and tell people where they can find you and where they can get your book?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. You can follow me on Facebook at Mica Rich. You can follow me on Instagram at Mica's _ don't _ like _ rain. And my website, micalediting.net. I also perform regularly at Stark Brewing Company on Thursday nights in Manchester. You can buy my book online through Barnes & Noble, through my website, and it is also on the shelves at Water Street Bookstore in Exeter. I'm working on getting it into a couple other bookstores, so stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't not time my love when it counted. But I'm singing like a bird about it now. I couldn't whisper when you needed it shouted. But I'm singing like a bird about it now. Words hung above, but never would form. Like a cry at the final breath that is drawn. Remember me, love, when I'm reborn. Is a shrike to your shine in glorious thorn. discounted. But I'm flying like a bird to you now. Back to the hedgerows where bodies are mounted. But I'm flying like a bird to you now. I was raised by your warmth, but that's transformed. But you're grounded and giving and darkening scorn. Remember me, love, when I'm reborn. It's a shrike to your shack and glorious thorn.
You were swallowing goddamn and dogmas you promised through your hands cannot align. Unsexy borrow, callow spin, I lost no looking for a place just not mine. Red on liquid, skin of unknown. Unwary hands, nomadic ghost, levied words from my spiteful throat. Understanding where my thoughts go, you build a boat out of my bones. Thought I'd claim you for the ocean, but I cannot grieve you with dirty hands. No star death casket in palms like these, white knuckles cracking, playing simple maths. We were squealing dogs with bad dreams, eyes that smile, gaze so dimly, isolated, nursing skin, knees weaker than I thought I'd be.
No one knows where the ladder goes. You're gonna lose what you love the most. You're not alone in anything. You're not unique in dying. Feel estranged every now and then. Fall asleep reading science fiction. I wanna fly in your silver ship. Let Jesus hang and Buddha sit. It's on now. The days are long now. The ups and the sundowns. In a twisting mind. If I gotta go first, I'll do it on my terms. I'm tired of traitors, always changing sides. They were friends of mine. Don't hang around once the promise breaks. You'll be there when the next one one's made. Kiss the feet of a charlatan. Some imagined freedom. All the rest is predictable. You can say you're the first to know. Bought a mantra to concentrate. Car alarm or hissing snake. I know now how it's gonna turn out. You gotta calm down or I'll lose my place. Gotta get to the center. Gotta get to the concert. Run off with a dancer. Gonna celebrate. Welcome to New Age. Covered in warrior paint. Lights from the jungle to the sky. See now a star's born. Looks just like a blood orange. Don't it just make you wanna cry? Precious friend of mine. Well, I know when it's finally done, this whole life's a hallucination. You're not alone in anything. You're not alone in trying to be.
I was fooled by your count. I was lost, but your fool was a long visit round. Say you are the only. So many foreign roads, so relatively far, so ready for us, so ready for us, so creature fear. I was teased by your blouse, spit out by your mouth. I was loud by your load, seminary soul. Tail on, tail on, take all the wind on. Soft bloody nose, sounding like the flow. So many territories ready to reform. Don't let it form us. Don't let it form us. So create your fear. Slow down, you crazy child. You're so ambitious for a juvenile. But then if you're so smart, tell me, why are you still so afraid? Where's the fire? What's the hurry about? You better cool it off before you burn it out. You got so much to do and only so many hours in a day. Hey, but you know that when the truth is told, that you can get what you want or you can just get old. You're gonna kick off before you even get halfway through. Ooh, when will you realize Vienna waits for you? Slow down, you're doing fine. You can't be everything you wanna be before your time. Although it's so romantic on the borderline tonight, tonight. Too bad, but it's the life you lead. You're so ahead of yourself that you forgot what you need. Though you can see when you're wrong, you know you can't always see when you're right. You're right. You got your passion, you got your pride, but don't you know that only fools are satisfied? Dream on, but don't imagine they'll all come true. Ooh, when will you realize Vienna waits for you? Slow down, you crazy child, and take the phone off the hook and disappear for a while. It's alright, you can't afford to lose a day or two. Ooh, when will you realize Vienna waits for you? And you know that when the truth is told, that you can get what you want or you can just get old. You're gonna kick off before you even get halfway through. Ooh, why don't you realize Vienna waits for you? When will you realize Vienna waits for you?
I walk to the rhythm of your heart. You ain't seen nothing till your mama falls apart. But I'm awake. I walk to the rhythm of your heart. But I'm still better at the bullies in the park. But I'm awake for you. The rhythm of your heart. I'm casting a shadow, but I'm down to play the part. But I'm awake. I walk to the rhythm of the sea. A memory full, but the soul is incomplete. But I'm awake for you.
I'm so tired of hearing tales of coming news, telling tales of a changing sky. It's just a shame that I didn't notice you till someone I loved had to die. What made us think that this was so different? Who is driving behind those things you say? Why do you insult me and my friends? Who are my friends anyway? I spent my life lying, now I pay the price. Are these really words of a young man or a worthless human life? I don't mean to scare you with the things I say. I take it back, yes, it's a beautiful day. I watched you from the beach when your ship sailed. You made it clear that nothing stays the same. It's getting darker, I wonder if you could tell. I wonder when did all that change? You never used to let me go unfed. I was so distracted I never saw the rain. You promised you meant every word you said. I wonder when did all that change? It hurts so bad to hear such pretty words coming from somebody like you. I've been looking for so long that I've lost touch with what's the best something to do. I've got a friend who makes good choices. Everyone likes the way that he sees things. I've got a problem and it walks me daily. Can you see no one's proud of me? It's a long road alone and I'm not proving anything going by myself. When your love light is on and really moving, oh sugar girl, I do appreciate the help. I had my fun with money, gold and diamonds. Thought went sour before they got to me. I'll be waiting, girl, but don't go counting hours. I'm not waiting for any of the three. I was just a peasant from the highlands. She said, don't you call me your mountain girl. I said, don't bother me, I'm trying to write, and don't worry, you ain't my mountain girl. I could call you, but I'd probably make you cry. These days it's what you oftentimes do. Call the preacher, then go call your father. Tell them that the wedding plans have moved. I sent a message, said I'd be gone forever. A letter of reply never came. She said that she'd be true, but I wouldn't let her. I wonder when did all that change? Hell has no fury like a woman, happy, scorned, or otherwise. Well, you can do what you want to with your name, but you can bet I'm changing mine. Well, I'd give $100 to get a letter if at the bottom it said I miss you bad. See, but the truth of the matter's no one back home really misses me. You see how I talk when I'm sad.
back to 5:05. If it's a 7-hour flight or a 45-minute drive.